Minions, welcome to Crank It Up. Today we're going to be taking a look at Game 4, Superhero Princesses at number 9 versus Ancient Egyptian Luchadors at number 24. 74% of people thought that Superhero Princesses were going to win this matchup, and I was one of them, and a lot of people are going to be upset about this one. I'm not one of them, which I'll get to in a second. So this is a very, very difficult decision, one that I spent at least a day thinking over. Who would win Superhero Princesses, one of the classic combos, versus Ancient Egyptian Luchadors, one of my new favorites? There's a lot of ways that one team can attack the other on both sides, and that made it a really difficult decision for me. I would change my mind back and forth. Do I want to be bold? Do I want to go with my gut? Do I want to go with my heart? I ended up picking Superhero Princesses simply because I thought that Eliza and her continued annoyance would be too much. Because anytime that you uncover a card, it counts as playing it, and Eliza would severely limit it and also hurt a lot of the specials that make Ancient Egyptians and Luchadors so powerful. I thought that Superhero Princesses would win in Game 3, that each team would take one, and that Superhero Princesses would ultimately take Game 3. But they didn't. In fact, they lost both games coming from behind. Now, when I did their intro video, I said that Ancient Egyptian Luchadors was my dark horse candidate to win the entire tournament, because they're so unknown and so unnoticed that I had mentioned that they were a late switch and that I didn't have as much experience with them as I would have liked. But when I started playing them, I fell in love with them, and I had called dibs on them, which is why I was playing them, even though I was actively betting against them with the bracket. I was playing them because I love them, but they can be really hard to play because they have a lot of specials and they have a lot of things that they can set up. There's a lot of cards that they can play at the last second, and you have to sort of anticipate what you want to do with them, because there's no shortage of good options, which is why they are so technically complex. Interestingly, I bet on Superhero Princesses to win. Smashness bet on Ancient Egyptian Luchadors to win, but we were each playing the other team. And that was a grueling match. And again, we're all very competitive. And so we don't care about brackets, we care about winning that actual matchup. And we had to put both teams in a position to succeed. If you're not familiar with Ancient Egyptians or Luchadors, because they're newer factions, together they have a ton of specials and a ton of ways of antagonizing their opponents. I talked about how each side can do something to the other. Well, Ancient Egyptians have a lot of destruction. Luchadors have a little bit of destruction as well. So Superhero Princesses can counter that. Whether it's with Expanded Power or Awesome Guy, they can counter that. The Luchadors rely on setup actions, which is something that are played in advance to get a future benefit later. Well, it's hard to set up a mild-mannered citizen because they self-destruct, and then you lose that action. But it also means that, by default, you have these high-powered superheroes and princesses because you have to play other minions, and you can set up those and get a good benefit out of that. And what you're going to be reversing with reversal is a high-powered minion, at least 5 or greater. You can still seed a Tomb Trap on one base, and then a mild-mannered citizen will get played there, only to get destroyed if Awesome Guy is not in play. And I think that's one of the things that really stood out about this matchup. And something that I had considered, but not to the full extent, which is why I bet on Superhero Princesses to win. There's too many ways, there's too many go-to minions that you need for Superhero Princesses. You need Awesome Guy to block the destruction. You need the Burst to block their crazy solo plays with a card like Blessing of Anubis. You need Eliza to block the extra plays. You need the mild-mannered citizens to avoid the setup cards and sort of be setup bait. And you can only get so many of them out at a given time, even when you're recycling them all back in. Snow White was actually really powerful, and I realized early on in the game that Snow White is the one I need to be worried about, because I have these elaborate engine minions and I want them on specific bases, and Snow White is going to wreck that all. Which is why Pin was the MVP of Game 1. Because as much as the superheroes could counter whatever it is the Luchadors are trying to do, they had no counter for Pin. In fact, Pin is really brutal against the higher power minions, because the power still contributes to the breakpoint, which doesn't slow the base down from scoring, but it doesn't give you any power. So for me to pin Snow White and still have that count towards the 3-2 base, that's really powerful. Pinning Eliza, her ability no longer affects me, which frees up my specials, but I still get a virtual 5 breakpoint damage. Pin is really powerful, and Eliza can't block it because you can quick set up and pin on the same turn, and that's within your rights, because quick setup is your regular action, and then pin is your extra action from quick setup. So it's very hard for them to combat that. And while both teams have recursions, the Superhero Princess recursion is a little bit slower, and it relies on the mild-mannered citizen, because you're generally putting cards on the bottom of your deck with Golden Age. Although you can shuffle them in, you just don't know when you're going to get them. There's only one option for Not Really Dead to grab back the mild-mannered citizens, which is also slow, but it generally works out more than it doesn't. With the Luchadors, they have a ton of recursion. Senor Mucho Slam can grab an action really quickly. They have Senor Mucho Slam versus the monsters to shuffle in any number of actions. They have the mummies, which stay in play, and even though the mummies would typically be apricot fodder, the mummies can stay uncovered until you need them. Or it can draw apricot out, and then you got 5 power that you could exploit. Eventually, the Ancient Egyptian Luchadors have so much card draw that I'm constantly discarding with them, and they just go through their deck. Even after recurring cards, they will go through their deck. You will get Pharaoh back. You will get Senor Mucho Slam back. Crystal Fortress, if that comes into play, that's really powerful because they have shuffling, but they also have card draw, and they can get their 5s back. You have to play in fear of their specials the entire time. And because of Lost Knowledge, if Eliza is dealt with, then the Ancient Egyptian Luchadors have a ton of ways that they can attack you. The princesses don't often have a lot of minions, but they tend to move them all at the same time. And Plague of Locusts can be pretty powerful, even against only 3 minions, especially if you're throwing it on as an add-on. Capa Roja won't be that much of an impact because you're only really destroying mild-mannered citizens, and they're unlikely to be in play when the base is scoring. But it actually has happened and did make a difference. But you've got the Threat of Reversal on a 5-powered minion. That's going to be really good. You have Lost Knowledge, which can uncover anything, or it could be a bluff. One of the key moments of Game 1 was actually Lost Knowledge bearing a card on a completely unrelated base. It's like, I'm good on this base, I'm going to solo this other base, and just end the game. And it's that type of versatility that I think makes the team very underappreciated and very dangerous, which is why I had labeled them my dark horse to win the tournament. It's too early to talk about what they'll have to do against Mythic Horse Sheep, but there's a lot of intrigue there as well. Now, personally, I'm pulling, I had them being eliminated, but it was going to break my heart. Now that they are going on, it's like, this is a team I want to go really far because they could do a ton of damage. I think that their profile is going to be raised by this victory. A lot of people like Superhero Princesses. I had them going pretty far. I had them going as far as round 3. But a 2-victory knockout is a pretty definitive statement. And you just have to say congrats to Ancient Egyptian Luchadors. Their profile is going to get raised, people will start giving them a second chance. They are hard to play, but they are definitely rewarding. I have loved playing them every single game. And now I'm excited that I have a chance to play them in round 2, and we'll see how that goes. Thanks so much for watching today. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's shut it down.